Right now, wherever you are, I want you to do something for me. Reach out and knock on a wooden table. Or, if you're not near one, just press your fingers against your own arm. Feel that? That undeniable solidity, the resistance, the absolute certainty of matter. When you push, it pushes back. This is the foundation of our entire reality. From the moment we are born, we learn that the world is made of solid things. Walls, chairs, skin, bones. It feels so undeniably real, doesn't it? But what if I told you that your senses are lying to you? What if that sensation of touch, that solid reality you rely on every single second of your life, is a cosmic illusion? The truth is, you have never actually touched anything in your entire life. Not the screen you are looking at, not the people you love, not even the ground you walk on. When you knocked on that table just now, your fingers didn't actually make contact with the wood. At a quantum level, your atoms were hovering nanometers above the surface. What you felt, that resistance, was nothing more than an invisible force field. You are feeling the electromagnetic repulsion of electrons pushing away from each other in the dark. You are, quite literally, levitating, always. It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? I remember the first time I really sat down and understood this, looking at my own hands and realizing they were mostly just empty space. It made me question everything I thought I knew about the physical world. It makes you wonder if the very ground beneath our feet is an illusion, if the boundaries of our own bodies are just a trick of physics, then where exactly do you end and where does the rest of the universe begin? I still haven't found a clear answer to that in my own mind. Over 200 years ago, long before we knew anything about electron clouds, the poet William Blake wrote 4 lines that seemed like pure mysticism at the time, but today they read like a quantum equation. He wrote, "To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour." Blake didn't have a particle accelerator. He didn't have an electron microscope. Yet he understood something that modern science is only just beginning to map out. That within the smallest, most insignificant speck of matter, there is an unimaginable vastness, a profound, echoing void. We are going to journey into that void. We are going to strip away the illusion of the solid world, layer by layer, atom by atom, until practically nothing left. Because out there, in the silence of that 99.99% empty space, modern physics violently collides with a 2,500-year-old realization, a truth so massive it completely destroys the idea of who you think you are.
For thousands of years, we were completely certain we understood how the universe was built. Think about it logically. If you take a stone and break it in half, you have 2 smaller stones. Break those, you get pebbles. Grind them down, you get dust. But what happens if you just keep going? If you take the absolute smallest speck of dust and cut it again and again and again, does it ever stop? Around 400 BC, an ancient Greek philosopher named Democritus proposed an answer that felt incredibly right. He said that eventually you would hit a wall. You would reach a piece of matter so tiny, so fundamentally solid, that it could no longer be divided. He called this ultimate building block atomos, which literally translates to uncuttable. It was a comforting thought. For over 2,000 years, humanity built its entire understanding of reality on this assumption. The universe, we believed, was constructed out of microscopic, indestructible little billiard balls, solid, reliable, real. But in 1909, a physicist named Ernest Rutherford decided to actually test this ancient assumption. He wanted to peek behind the curtain of reality. He set up an experiment at the University of Manchester, a quiet, methodical test that would end up completely destroying the physical world as we knew it. Rutherford and his team took a piece of gold foil and pounded it down until it was unimaginably thin. Then, they fired a beam of alpha particles directly at it. You can think of alpha particles as tiny, incredibly fast, heavy subatomic bullets. Now, if the universe was made of solid, uncuttable atoms, like humanity had believed since the days of Democritus, these tiny, incredibly fast bullets should slam into the gold atoms and bounce off. It just makes sense. If you shoot a bullet at a solid brick wall, it doesn't go through, it ricochets. Rutherford set up his detectors, fully expecting to see these subatomic bullets bounce off the solid wall of gold. He turned on the beam, he waited in the dark laboratory. And the result completely broke his mind. Almost every single alpha particle didn't bounce. They ripped straight through the gold foil as if nothing was there at all. 99.99% of the particles passed right through solid gold without a single collision. It was impossible. How could a supposedly solid object let thousands of heavy particles pass straight through its core without a single collision? The absolute solidity of the world was suddenly gone. Rutherford was staring at the undeniable proof that matter, real, heavy, valuable gold, was almost entirely composed of empty space. He was so deeply shaken by this revelation, years later trying to explain the sheer horror and awe of that moment, he said, "It was quite the most incredible event that has ever happened to me in my life. It was almost as incredible as if you fired a 15-inch artillery shell at a piece of tissue paper and it came back and hit you." Just put yourself in his shoes for a moment, sitting in that cold room, realizing the solid reality you've known your whole life, the ground you walk on, your own hands, is mostly just a ghost. When I think about Rutherford staring at that data, realizing the world is mostly empty space, I can't help but wonder about us. We have fought brutal wars, we have built massive empires, and we have guarded imaginary borders over pieces of land and pieces of gold that are fundamentally, practically, nothing at all. Does knowing the physical world is an illusion make human struggles feel completely meaningless? Or does it somehow make the fact that we can feel, love, and exist in this emptiness even more of a miracle? I've been wrestling with that thought for a long time, and honestly, I still haven't found a clear answer for myself between those two extremes.
So, just how empty is this void that Rutherford stumbled upon? When we picture an atom in our minds, we usually think of the diagrams we saw in high school chemistry books. A tight little cluster in the middle and electrons orbiting around it like planets around the sun in neat, close little rings. But those textbook drawings are a lie. They have to be drawn that way, because if they were drawn to scale, the page wouldn't be big enough. To truly understand the reality of your own body, you have to imagine a completely different scale. Close your eyes for a second. Imagine you are standing in the very center of a massive, roaring football stadium. Now reach into your pocket and pull out a single, small glass marble. Place that marble right down on the 50-yard line. That marble is the nucleus of the atom. It's where almost all of the mass of the atom lives, the protons and the neutrons. Now, where are the electrons? They aren't hovering right next to the marble. To find the electrons, you have to look all the way up to the absolute highest seats in the furthest bleachers of the stadium. Up there, flying around at unimaginable speeds, are a few tiny gnats. Those gnats are the electrons. And what is in between the marble on the grass and the gnats in the highest seats? Is it air? No, air is made of atoms. Between the nucleus and the electrons, there is absolutely nothing. A profound, silent, dead void. That massive, empty stadium is what you are made of. Every cell in your heart, every strand of your hair, the chair you are sitting on, the walls of your house, it is all 99.9999% pure emptiness. Let me push this reality to its absolute limit for you. Right now, there are over 8 billion human beings walking the surface of this planet. 8 billion distinct lives, bodies, minds, cities full of people, armies, entire generations.
But if some cosmic force were to suddenly squeeze us, if it were to collapse that stadium and remove all the empty quantum space from inside every single atom of every single person on Earth, all 8 billion of us, the entire human race, we would easily fit into the exact volume of a single sugar cube. Just let that sink in for a moment. The entire mass of humanity, everything we physically are, is no bigger than a lump of sugar you drop into your morning coffee. The rest of our size, our height, our presence in this world is just an inflation of empty space. If you are listening to this right now, I want you to pause for a second. If you had to choose just one single word to describe how that realization makes you feel, what would it be? For me, the word is fragile. It's fascinating to think what word immediately comes to your mind when you realize how little of you is actually there. We walk around feeling so heavy, so permanent, so anchored to this earth. But the brutal truth of physics is that we are walking ghosts. We are floating architectures of nothingness, held together by invisible forces, moving through a universe that is just as empty as we are.
So, if we are basically nothing, if you and I are just a handful of dust scattered across an empty stadium, why didn't my hand pass right through this desk when I knocked on it? Why do car crashes crush metal and bone? If we are 99.9% empty void, why does the world feel so painfully, undeniably solid? The answer lies out there in the highest bleachers of that empty stadium, those gnats, the electrons. Electrons carry a negative electrical charge, and if you remember playing with magnets when you were a kid, you know exactly what happens when you push two negative ends together. They repel, they fight back. As your hand gets closer to a table, the electron clouds in the atoms of your skin approach the electron clouds in the atoms of the wood, and they absolutely refuse to touch. In fact, there's a strict, unbreakable rule in quantum mechanics called the Pauli exclusion principle. It essentially states that no two particles of matter can ever occupy the exact same quantum space at the same time. The universe strictly forbids it. So, what you feel when you push against a wall isn't physical contact. It's the sensation of your electrons screaming at the wall's electrons, creating an invisible, powerful force field of repulsion. When you really think about what this implies for human connection, it gets strange. I've been wrestling with this idea lately, and I honestly haven't found a clear answer for myself yet. If physical contact is mathematically and physically impossible, if we are just invisible force fields violently pushing against other force fields, is the warmth of a hug or the feeling of holding someone's hand just a mechanical illusion of the brain interpreting magnetic resistance? Or is the exchange of energy between those fields something much deeper than physical matter? I lean towards believing that what we call touch is just an emotional hallucination created by the nervous system, but it makes you wonder if our entire experience of love and closeness is just a beautiful lie we tell ourselves to survive this emptiness. Let me make this reality even more immediate for you. Wherever you are sitting right now, whether it's on a chair, a sofa, or the seat of your car, you are not actually touching it. The atoms in your clothes and your skin are hovering a fraction of a nanometer above the atoms of the seat. The negative electrical charges are pushing against each other with exactly enough force to counteract the downward pull of gravity. You are literally levitating. You have been levitating your entire life. You are a ghost floating through a world you can never, ever truly touch. Western science uncovered this terrifying, beautiful emptiness in the early 20th century. It took massive laboratories, complex experiments, and brilliant physicists staring through the lens of modern mathematics to finally crack the code of reality and see the void. But here is the part that is truly difficult to comprehend. Over 2,500 years earlier, long before microscopes, before electricity, before the modern concept of physics even existed, a man walked into a forest in northern India. He sat down beneath the branches of a Bodhi tree, crossed his legs, and simply closed his eyes. He didn't have a particle accelerator. He only had his own mind. And yet,
Looking deep into the architecture of his own consciousness, he realized the exact same terrifying emptiness. When we think of the Buddha today, we usually picture a golden statue, a serene figure sitting perfectly still, eyes half closed, a faint smile on his lips, surrounded by the smell of incense and the sound of chanting. We think of religion. We think of divine peace. But if you strip away thousands of years of mythology, ritual, and dogma, Siddhartha Gautama wasn't trying to start a religion at all. He was a man who was deeply, existentially terrified by the reality of sickness, aging, and death. He was, in modern terms, a metaphysical hacker. He was trying to crack the source code of human existence. For years, he pushed his mind and body to the absolute brink, wandering the forests of India. He was looking for the one thing we all assume we have, the core, the soul, the permanent, solid me that sits somewhere just behind the eyes and pilots this biological machine. We all feel it, don't we? You feel like you. There is a continuous thread from your childhood to this exact second. You believe there is a solid center to your existence. So, sitting in the deep silence under that Bodhi tree, Siddhartha began to brutally dissect his own reality, not with a scalpel, but with absolute concentrated awareness. He broke the human experience down into 5 distinct parts, peeling them back one by one. In ancient texts, these are called the khandhas, or the 5 aggregates. First, he looked at form, the physical body, the flesh, the blood, the bones. But observing closely, he saw that the body is constantly changing, decaying, literally replacing itself piece by piece every single day. The body you have today is not the body you had 10 years ago. Therefore, the physical form is not permanent. It cannot be the true self. He discarded the body and moved deeper. He looked at feelings, the immediate sensations of pleasure, pain, or neutrality. But feelings flash like lightning and vanish just as quickly. They are temporary reactions to the environment. They are not a permanent identity. He went deeper still. Perception, the way we recognize a color, a sound, or a memory, also temporary. Then he looked at mental formations, our habits, our desires, our deep-seated prejudices, our constantly flowing thoughts. He sat there and watched his own thoughts rise and fall like waves on an ocean. He realized a profound truth. You are not your thoughts. You are merely the space where thoughts happen to appear. Finally, he reached the absolute bottom layer. Consciousness itself, the sheer act of being aware. Surely, he thought, this must be the eternal I. But Siddhartha observed that even consciousness only exists in relation to something else. You are conscious of a sound. You are conscious of a sight. If you remove the sound and the sight, the consciousness of it vanishes. It does not exist independently. He had peeled back all the layers of the human onion. Body, feeling, perception, thought, consciousness. He reached the very center, expecting to finally find the eternal solid pearl of the soul. And what did he find? Nothing. He found absolutely nothing. He realized there is no core. There is no permanent, unchanging you. What you call yourself is just an illusion created by these 5 moving parts interacting together, moving so incredibly fast that they create the blur of a single identity. Just like an airplane propeller spinning so fast it looks like a solid disk, the spinning aggregates create the illusion of a solid ego. He called this terrifying yet deeply liberating truth anatta, non-self. Right now, as you listen to my voice, I want you to try this experiment in your own mind. Strip away your physical body. Strip away your current emotions. Strip away your memories and your racing thoughts.
If you had to define the absolute core of who you are without using your body, your past, or your feelings in just one single word, what word would that be? For me, when I really sit in that dark silence, the word that comes up is simply observer, but it's incredibly difficult to pin down. I'm genuinely curious what your word is. When all the layers are gone, what is the one word that remains for you? Siddhartha realized that the human ego is exactly like the atoms Rutherford would discover thousands of years later, a thin, vibrating shell of energy surrounding a vast, profound emptiness. We cling so desperately to this idea of me. We fight for it, we get offended for it, we cry for it, we build monuments to it. But the me is just a ghost in the machine, a shadow dancing in the quantum void.
Whenever we reach this point in the conversation, whenever that terrifying word is finally spoken, I always notice a very specific reaction. People pull back. We have this deep, almost allergic reaction to the concept of emptiness. Especially in the modern world, we instinctively equate emptiness with nihilism. We picture a dark, depressing black hole, a dead vacuum where nothing matters, where existence is just some cruel, random joke. We think to be empty means to be dead. But that is arguably the greatest, most tragic misunderstanding of ancient philosophy in human history. The original Sanskrit word used to describe this profound void is sunyata. And sunyata does not mean nothingness. It does not mean a black, empty room. The true translation is far more beautiful and far more dangerous to our egos. It means being devoid of intrinsic, independent existence. Let that sink in. It means that absolutely nothing in this universe can exist entirely on its own. Everything is a constantly shifting web of relationships. You only exist because of the air in your lungs, the bacteria in your stomach, the gravity of the earth, the light from a star millions of miles away. You are not a solid, independent noun. You are a verb. You are a happening. Centuries after the Buddha made this realization, monks across Asia began chanting a text called the Heart Sutra. It is the core of Mahayana Buddhism. And right in the middle of this ancient, echoing chant, there is a single line that is considered the absolute pinnacle of Eastern philosophy. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. For thousands of years, scholars treated this as a beautiful, mystical riddle, a spiritual metaphor to help people detach from their worldly desires. But I want you to think back to what we uncovered just a little while ago. Think about Ernest Rutherford sitting in that dark laboratory in 1909. Think about the gold foil. Think about the single marble sitting on the 50-yard line of a massive, silent football stadium with a few gnats buzzing in the highest bleachers. What did modern science definitively prove? The solid form of the atom is literally composed of 99.99% empty space. And that very empty space, governed by invisible quantum forces, is what gives matter its shape, its resistance, its physical reality. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. The ancient monks sitting in the mountains of India and Tibet weren't just speaking in poetic metaphors, they were reciting literal, verifiable quantum physics. They had mapped the subatomic structure of the universe using nothing but the quiet focus of their own minds. When you really let the weight of that hit you, it changes the way you look at everything around you. If I'm being completely honest, I firmly believe that this realization, truly understanding sunyata, is the absolute best cure for modern human anxiety. We spend our entire lives exhausted, fighting tooth and nail to protect this solid, independent self. But science and ancient wisdom are both screaming at us that there is no solid self to protect. We are just a temporary arrangement of starlight and empty space. But I often wonder about how different minds process this truth. When you hear this, when you truly visualize that your body, your memories, and the world around you are fundamentally empty and deeply interconnected, does that thought terrify you, or does it bring you a profound sense of relief? I still haven't figured out why, but it seems to split people right down the middle. Some find it utterly horrifying, while others find it to be the most liberating thing they've ever heard. Around the 2nd century, long after the original teachings of the Buddha had spread, a man emerged in India who I can only describe as the Albert Einstein of the ancient world. His name was Nagarjuna. He didn't just accept the ancient texts, he took them, dissected them, and pushed the logic of reality to its absolute breaking point. Nagarjuna founded a philosophical school called Madhyamaka, known as the Middle Way, and at the very center of his teaching is a concept so profound, yet so brutally logical, that once you truly understand it, you will never look at a physical object the same way again. In Sanskrit, the term is pratiti samutpada. In English, we call it dependent origination. To understand what this means, I want you to imagine holding a single blooming flower in your hand. You look at it, you feel its weight, you smell its scent, and your brain tells you this is a flower. It feels like an independent, standalone object. It has its own identity. But Nagarjuna would ask you to look closer. Look past the illusion of the solid object. If you look deeply into the petals of that flower, what are you actually holding? You are holding the rain that fell from the sky weeks ago to water it. You are holding the minerals from the soil. You are holding the energy from the sun, a star burning millions of miles away. And crucially, you are holding the observer, your own biological eyes and brain, which are actively translating specific wavelengths of light into the colors you perceive. Nagarjuna pointed out something devastatingly simple. If you take away the sunlight, if you take away the rain, if you take away the soil, and if you take away the mind that is observing it, where is the flower? It vanishes. It doesn't exist. There is no hidden independent essence of flowerness sitting inside that object. The flower is nothing more than a temporary meeting point of a million different causes and conditions. It is an event, not a thing. Whenever I think about this idea of dependent origination, I can't help but wonder about our own human identities. If a flower only exists because of everything outside of it, then who are we without the people and the world that have shaped us? If you were somehow to erase every single conversation you've ever had, every heartbreak you've endured, the culture you grew up in, and every person who has ever loved you or hurt you, would there actually be any you left at all? It's a strange thing to think about. I'm genuinely curious how you view your own identity when you look at it through that lens. Nagarjuna deconstructed the entire universe with pure logic. He proved mathematically, in a philosophical sense, that nothing can exist on its own. Everything is completely empty of independent existence. We are all just temporary knots in an infinite cosmic web. For nearly 2 millennia, the Western world looked at this concept of sunyata and dependent origination as nothing more than Eastern mysticism. Beautiful poetry, sure, but not hard science, not reality. But then came the 1920s. A group of brilliant physicists in Europe began building machines and mathematical models capable of peering into the absolute foundational layers of matter. They were looking for the solid building blocks of reality. But what they found shivering in the dark at the quantum level completely shattered the scientific community, because they realized, with a mixture of absolute horror and awe, that the physical universe was behaving exactly like an ancient Buddhist sutra. How did the universe start behaving like an ancient Buddhist text in the 1920s? It all began with a surprisingly simple yet deeply disturbing experiment. It's called the double-slit experiment. Imagine a barrier with 2 vertical slits cut into it. Behind that barrier is a solid back wall. Now imagine you are holding a gun that fires tiny, solid paintballs. If you spray paintballs at the barrier, the ones that make it through the slits will hit the back wall and form 2 neat vertical columns of paint. It is simple Newtonian common sense. But when physicists replaced those paintballs with quantum particles like electrons and fired them at the 2 slits, they didn't get 2 columns on the back wall. Instead, they saw a complex striped pattern of many lines, an interference pattern. The kind of pattern you only get when waves, like ripples in water, pass through the slits, overlap,
collide and cancel each other out. The solid electrons were behaving like fluid waves. So the scientists decided to slow things down. They fired the electrons one by one, with hours in between each shot. If you fire a single electron, it has to choose. It must go through slit A or slit B. It cannot do both. But even when fired one by one, the striped wave pattern still slowly formed on the back wall. It was as if a single electron traveled toward the barrier, split itself in two, passed through both slits at the exact same time, interfered with itself, and landed on the wall as a single dot. This is what we call quantum superposition, the ability of a particle to exist in multiple states, in multiple places, as a wave of infinite possibilities all at the same time. Naturally, the physicists wanted to see this trick with their own eyes. They placed a tiny measuring device, a detector, right next to the slits to watch which path the electron actually took. They turned the detector on, they fired the single electrons, and the moment the detector was watching, the ghost vanished. The electrons instantly stopped acting like waves of infinite possibilities. They behaved like solid little paintballs, passing through either the left slit or the right slit, and forming just two neat columns on the back wall. The universe changed its behavior simply because it was being watched. This is the observer effect. Think about the staggering implications of this. Before we look, before we measure, the universe at its most fundamental level is not a collection of solid, independent things. It is a wave of probabilities. It is a cloud of infinite potential. It is only the act of observation, the act of a conscious mind looking at it, that forces the universe to collapse from a wave of infinite possibilities into a single, solid reality. This is the exact heart of Buddhist philosophy. This is what Nagarjuna argued 1800 years ago. Subject and object co-create each other. There is no independent observer, and there is no independent world being observed. Without the mind to perceive it, the universe remains an uncollapsed cloud of potential. If I'm being completely honest, I'm willing to take a rather extreme stance on this. I truly believe that reality, in a very literal sense, does not exist when we are not looking at it. The universe is a blank quantum canvas, waiting for a mind to paint it into existence. But I know that for many people that sounds like absolute madness. It's the classic philosophical riddle. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? But quantum physics asks an even deeper, more terrifying question. If no one is in the forest, does the tree itself even exist? I've heard some incredibly brilliant arguments on both sides of this, and I still can't find a way to settle it in my own mind. I really want to know where you stand on this. Does consciousness create the universe, or are we just passive passengers in a reality that would exist just fine without us? As mind-bending as the observer effect is, there is another quantum phenomenon that is so deeply strange it made Albert Einstein physically uncomfortable. He spent the rest of his life trying to prove it was a mistake. He famously dismissed it, calling it spooky action at a distance. Today, we call it quantum entanglement. To understand this spookiness, imagine two subatomic particles that are created at the exact same moment from the exact same energy source. Because of their shared origin, they are fundamentally linked or entangled. Now, imagine we separate them. We keep one particle in a laboratory on Earth, and we take the other one, put it in a spaceship, and send it to the opposite side of the universe, billions of light years away. Before we look at them, both particles exist in that wave of infinite potential, spinning in all directions at once. But the moment we observe the particle on Earth, it collapses into a single state. Let's say it starts spinning up. Instantly, at that exact same microsecond, the particle on the other side of the universe reacts, collapsing into a spin pointing down. How did the second particle know? For information to travel between them across the cosmos, it would have to travel faster than the speed of light, which Einstein proved is physically impossible. Yet, the reaction is instantaneous. It is as if space, the vast millions of light years separating them, doesn't actually exist for these particles. At a deeper, unseen level of reality, they are still touching. They are still one. This profound cosmic entanglement is the exact picture painted in one of the most beautiful Mahayana Buddhist texts, the Avatamsaka Sutra. Inside this ancient scripture, there is a legendary metaphor known as Indra's net. The sutra asks you to imagine a vast, infinite web created by the god Indra, stretching endlessly in all directions across the entire cosmos. At every single knot of this net hangs a single brilliant, highly polished jewel. Because the net is infinite, there are infinite jewels. And if you lean in close to look at any one of those jewels, you will see something breathtaking. On its polished surface, you will see the reflections of every other jewel in the net. And in those reflections, you see the reflections of all the other reflections, infinitely. If you touch one jewel, if you make it vibrate, every jewel across the entire cosmic net shifts instantaneously. Every jewel contains the entire net within itself. When you think about this, it shifts from a dry physics lesson into something deeply personal. I remember when I first realized the cosmological implication of this. In the beginning, before the Big Bang, everything in our universe was compressed into a single, infinitesimally small point. Every atom in your body, every particle of the Earth, and every star in the farthest galaxy were all touching, squeezed into one. If particles that share an origin remain entangled, does that mean everything in the universe is still technically entangled? Is your consciousness fundamentally linked to the stars or to the person sitting next to you through a literal quantum connection? I can't help but wonder if those strange moments of intuition we all experience, like thinking of a friend right before they text you or sensing when a loved one is in trouble, are just coincidence, or if we are occasionally feeling the subtle tug of our own cosmic entanglement. I know some people think that's just superstitious nonsense, but it's a riddle I still can't shake. Have you ever felt a connection like that? Something that felt like it defied space and time? I'm curious what you think about this. The ancient sages and the quantum physicists are telling us the exact same story. Separation is an illusion. We are not isolated observers looking at a cold, distant universe. We are the universe, looking back at itself, instantly communicating across the dark, beautifully entangled in an infinite net of light. When these brilliant minds of the 1920s began peering into the subatomic world, they found themselves facing a profound crisis of language. Their mathematics was solid, but their classical Western concepts of reality were completely useless. They were trying to describe a world where things could be waves and particles at the same time, where separation was an illusion, and where the act of looking actually created the object. To make sense of this mathematical abyss, the founding fathers of quantum mechanics had to do something unprecedented. They had to look east. Niels Bohr, the man who unlocked the structure of the atom, spent years struggling with what he called complementarity, the idea that two contradictory properties can both be true of the same thing. To explain this to a highly skeptical scientific community, Bohr didn't turn to European philosophers. He turned to ancient Chinese thought. In 1947, when Bohr was knighted by the King of Denmark for his revolutionary work, he asked to design his own family coat of arms. He didn't choose an atom or a mathematical equation or a symbol of Danish royalty. He chose the ancient symbol of the yin-yang. And above it, he carved his life's motto, Contraria sunt complementa. Opposites are complementary. He wanted everyone to know that his quantum physics was merely a modern translation of a truth the East had understood for millennia. Then there was J. Robert Oppenheimer, the brilliant, tormented leader of the Manhattan Project. Oppenheimer was a man of immense intellectual hunger, but as he led the creation of the atomic bomb, he felt a crushing existential weight. To find peace and to understand the terrifying nature of the universe he was exposing, he did something extraordinary. He learned Sanskrit, the ancient language of India, specifically so he could read the Bhagavad Gita in its original, untranslated form. When he witnessed the first atomic blast at the Trinity test site, watching that blinding column of fire boil into the desert sky, he didn't just see a weapon of war. He was staring at the ultimate non-dualistic reality. He later recalled that the words of the Gita immediately echoed in his mind. If the radiance of 1,000 suns were to burst at once into the sky, that would be like the splendor of the Mighty One. And then the famous chilling line, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." For Oppenheimer, the atomic nucleus and the ancient Hindu texts were speaking the exact same terrifying language. But perhaps the deepest plunge into Eastern mysticism was taken by Erwin Schrödinger, the mind behind the wave equation that forms the very spine of quantum mechanics. Schrödinger looked at his own equations, which showed that particles exist as waves of infinite possibilities until observed, and he came to a conclusion that would make most modern materialists deeply uncomfortable. He wrote in his own personal journals that the idea of separate individual minds is a grand illusion. He wrote, "There is obviously only one mind." He believed with absolute certainty that we are not separate observers looking at different parts of the world. We are one single universal consciousness looking out through billions of different eyes. It is incredibly humbling to realize that the giants who built our modern technological world had to look back thousands of years to find the vocabulary for their own discoveries. Today, I've shared how Bohr, Oppenheimer, and Schrödinger walked this bridge between East and West, but I know they aren't the only ones. I'm well aware that among those listening to my voice right now, there are people who have read deeply into Werner Heisenberg's meetings with the Indian philosopher Rabindranath Tagore, or David Bohm's intense dialogues with Jiddu Krishnamurti. I've only laid out 3 pieces of this massive puzzle today, and I suspect some of you know the deeper hidden chapters of this history that I haven't even touched upon. I would love to see those blanks filled in, because this quiet revolution of the mind is far vaster than just 3 men. It leaves us with a haunting realization. The cutting-edge mathematics of the 20th century was not a new discovery. It was a rediscovery. The Western mind had finally built the instruments to prove what the Eastern mind had already known, sitting in absolute silence thousands of years ago.
When we step away from the abstract world of quantum physics and look directly at ourselves, we discover that this great cosmic illusion is not just happening out there in the stars, it is happening right now, inside your own flesh. To understand this, we have to travel back to ancient Greece and look at a puzzle that has haunted philosophers for thousands of years. It's called the ship of Theseus. Imagine a magnificent wooden ship sailing the seas. Over its long life, its wooden planks naturally begin to rot. One by one, the crew pulls out the old, decayed wood and replaces it with a fresh, strong, new plank. They do this slowly, year after year, as the ship travels. Eventually, decades pass, and every single plank, every sail, every nail, and every rope has been replaced. Not a single original piece of wood from the day the ship first launched remains. The question is simple, yet incredibly difficult. Is it still the same ship? If you say yes, then why? Not a single physical piece of it is the same. If you say no, then at what exact plank did it stop being the ship of Theseus? This is not just a dusty Greek thought experiment. This is your literal biology. As you sit here listening to my voice, your body is quietly playing the role of that ship. You might feel like a solid, permanent object, but you are in a state of constant aggressive flux. The cells lining your stomach, exposed to the brutal corrosive acids of digestion, are completely replaced every 5 days.
The skin you are touching right now, the outer shield of your body, is entirely shed and renewed every 4 weeks. Even your skeleton, which feels as solid and permanent as stone, is constantly being broken down and rebuilt, completely remodeling itself over a decade. In fact, on a subatomic level, biophysicists estimate that roughly 98% of the atoms that make your human body are swapped out and replaced by new ones every single year. The carbon, the hydrogen, the oxygen, and the nitrogen that built your body 10 years ago are no longer inside you. They have left your body through your breath, your sweat, and your waste. Those atoms are currently scattered across the planet, trapped inside trees, floating in rain clouds, or built into the bodies of other living creatures. Which leads us to a terrifying, beautiful question. If almost every single atom that made up your physical body 10 years ago is gone, where is the you? If you are not the physical matter you are made of, what are you? I want you to try a very quiet, very personal experiment. Sometime today, pull up an old photograph of yourself from 10 or 15 years ago. Sit with it in a quiet room and just look into the eyes of that person. Realize with absolute scientific certainty that the person in that photograph does not share the same physical matter as the person looking at the photograph right now. Biologically, that person is a completely different physical object, yet you carry their memories, you feel their regrets, you inherit their dreams. I did this myself recently, looking at a picture of me from my early 20s, and it honestly blew my mind. It felt like I was staring at a ghost, a completely different human being who had simply passed their diary and their thoughts down to me. It is a deeply haunting, almost spiritual feeling to realize you are surviving on the memories of a body that no longer exists. Have you ever looked at an old photo of yourself and felt that exact same strange, unexplainable disconnect? Like you were looking at a stranger who handed you their life. I would love to know if any of you have experienced that same shift in perspective when looking back at your younger self, because it really makes you question what we are actually holding on to when we say the word I. We are not the wood of the ship. We are the pattern of the ship. Just like a whirlpool in a river, the water is constantly changing, but the shape of the whirlpool remains. You are not a static collection of atoms. You are a biological process. You are a beautifully organized flow of energy, temporarily holding a shape, dancing in the quiet emptiness of the universe.
If we are a constantly shifting biological whirlpool, with our cells and atoms continuously flowing in and out of the environment, why does it feel so incredibly convincing that we are a solid, permanent I sitting inside our heads? Why does this illusion of an ego feel so utterly impenetrable? To find the answer, we have to look at the master storyteller of the human brain. Neuroscientists have mapped out a highly specific, interconnected web of brain regions called the default mode network, or simply the DMN. The DMN is the exact machinery where your ego is generated. It is the software of the self. This network is highly active when you are doing nothing at all, when you are daydreaming, worrying about the future, rehashing old embarrassments, or constructing the ongoing narrative of my life. It is the constant nagging whisper that says, "This is my past, this is my reputation, this is my pain." It is a biological simulation running in the background, constantly calculating the boundaries of where you end and where the rest of the universe begins. But what happens when we quietly unplug this machine? In recent years, researchers decided to put two very different groups of people into fMRI scanners to observe the brain during moments of deep spiritual transcendence. They scanned Zen masters and Tibetan monks who have spent decades in silent meditation, and they scanned individuals undergoing profound high-dose psychedelic experiences. Under normal logic, you would expect their brains to light up with massive electrical activity during these intense, mind-expanding states. But the fMRI machines showed the exact, shocking opposite.
The default mode network didn't light up. It went completely, utterly dark. The master storyteller was suddenly silenced. The electricity in the ego's control room was turned off. And when that network goes quiet, the brain instantly stops simulating separation. The neurological filter that keeps you feeling like an isolated prisoner inside a skull dissolves. The boundary between inside my head and outside in the room completely vanishes. This is the state known as ego death. People who experience this do not report that they have vanished into nothingness. Instead, they report a feeling of absolute, boundless unity. They realize with terrifying clarity that the feeling of being a separate, isolated ego was just a biological calculation, an evolutionary trick to help us survive. When the brain stops telling the story of me, the universe simply experiences itself. It's a fascinating, almost terrifying realization, and it makes me wonder, have you ever touched that space? Have you ever experienced a moment in your life where your self completely disappeared, whether through deep meditation, an extreme flow state, a near-death experience, or some other profound moment? A moment where there was no thinker, only the thoughts, no doer, only the doing. If you have ever touched that boundless state, even for a fraction of a second, how did it change your perspective when your ego eventually came back and rebuilt itself? It really makes you wonder which is the true illusion, the chaotic, separate, anxious lives we lead every day, or that quiet, boundless ocean we occasionally slip into when the brain finally goes quiet. I would love to hear how you navigate that boundary in your own life and what it felt like to step outside of yourself. Our ego is not a solid soul. It is a filter, a narrow window through which a vast quantum universe is squeezed so we don't go mad from the sheer infinite scale of it all. But when that filter falls, the doors of perception swing wide open, and the illusion of separation is finally laid to rest.
At this point, the skeptic in you is probably screaming. It is a very natural, very human reaction. Back in the 18th century, when the philosopher George Berkeley argued that the material world was nothing but an illusion of our perception, a writer named Samuel Johnson was asked how he would refute such an absurd idea. Dr. Johnson walked up to a massive stone, kicked it violently with his foot, felt the sharp sting of pain, and declared, "I refute it thus." And today, we might ask the exact same thing. If everything is 99.9% empty space, if the ego is a simulation and matter is a phantom, why does it hurt so much when a speeding car hits you? Why do we get sick? Why do diseases like cancer physically destroy our bodies? Why is there real, agonizing suffering in the world? Nagarjuna anticipated this exact doubt 1,800 years ago, and his answer was a stroke of philosophical genius known as the Two Truths doctrine. He argued that to survive, we must operate in two completely different yet equally valid dimensions of reality at the same time. The first is conventional truth, samvriti satya. This is the everyday world of cause and effect. In this dimension, cars are heavy, bones are fragile, fire burns, and pain is entirely, brutally real. If a truck is speeding toward you, you don't stand there meditating on the emptiness of the atom. You run. The second is ultimate truth, paramartha satya. This is the reality beneath the surface, the quantum world. In this dimension, there is no car, there is no body, there is no sickness. There are only fluctuating fields of energy and probability moving through the void. Think about how a car crash actually works when you merge these two truths. When that heavy metal bumper collides with your leg, no two solid particles are actually touching. It is a dense, high-velocity matrix of repelling electron fields violently crashing into your own repelling electron fields. The kinetic energy transfer is real. The chemical damage to your cells is real. The neurological pain signals screaming to your brain are absolutely real. The pain is real, but the solidity is still a cosmic illusion of those repelling force fields. If I'm being completely honest, I believe this is where most people get stuck, and I completely understand why. Some people hear this two truths concept and find it incredibly heartless. They argue that calling physical suffering an electron force field or an illusion completely dismisses the raw, tragic pain of being a human. But I see it from a completely, almost radical perspective. I'm quite convinced that understanding these two truths is the only way to truly survive suffering without being destroyed by it. It allows you to feel the pain conventionally while knowing deeply at the ultimate level that the pain does not define your boundless nature. But I know this is a deeply polarizing way to look at life. I often wonder, when you face pain or hardship in your own life, does it help you to look at the ultimate quantum perspective of emptiness? Or does it feel like a cold academic way to avoid the messy, fragile reality of being human? I've seen some deeply passionate arguments on both sides, and it's a riddle I still wrestle with. Where do you find your balance between these two truths? Pain is a bridge. It is the exact point where the conventional world of flesh and bone forces us to remember our fragile biology, even while the ultimate world of quantum emptiness reminds us of our infinite nature. Why does all of this matter? Why have we traveled from the gold foil experiments of Manchester to the ancient Bodhi tree in India? Why do we care about the quantum void, the default mode network, or the illusion of the ego? Because this is not just an academic exercise in physics or philosophy. This is the ultimate cure for human suffering. Think about your modern anxieties, your depression, your deep, quiet insecurities. What is their ultimate source? They are all born from the ego frantically trying to protect a solid, independent self that does not actually exist. We spend our entire lives building high walls around a ghost. We get hurt, we get offended, we cling to possessions, to reputations, to relationships, desperately trying to freeze them in time. But trying to hold on to these things is like trying to grab a fistful of running water. In Buddhism, this painful, futile clinging to the temporary is called dukkha. And in quantum physics, it is simply trying to stop the natural, constantly fluctuating flow of energy fields. When you finally accept your own emptiness, when you realize there is no rigid, permanent you to defend, an incredible weight is lifted off your shoulders. There is no longer anything to hold on to, nothing to be offended, and nothing to lose. By letting go of the illusion of control, you finally align yourself with the laws of physics. You stop fighting the river, you become the river. Let's bring everything back to this exact quiet moment. Wherever you are, reach out and touch that table in front of you one last time, or just press your fingers gently against your own arm. Feel that resistance. But now you know the absolute truth of what is happening. You know you are not actually making contact. You are touching empty space. Your atoms are hovering, suspended by invisible quantum fields, vibrating in a silent, beautiful dance. Every single element inside your body, the iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, was forged in the nuclear fire of a dying star billions of years ago. You are intimately mathematically connected to the furthest galaxies. You are a temporary biological illusion of the universe, a brief whirlpool of starlight that has somehow developed the miraculous capacity to look back and understand itself. It is a staggering reality to wake up to, and it leaves us with the ultimate riddle of human existence. If your entire life, your struggles, and your identity are just a temporary wave in a vast quantum ocean, does this realization free you to live more boldly, to love without fear, knowing there is nothing to lose?
Or does it make you want to shrink back into the comfort of the illusion? Once you realize that you've been protecting is just a phantom, who is the one that chooses what to do next? It is a question that has no easy answer, and it is something we must all figure out in the quiet of our own minds. I would love to know what that answer looks like for you. You are not a separate, fragile creature fighting against a hostile, cold world. To quote the mystic poet Rumi, you are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a single drop. You are the universe tasting itself. You are the infinite hiding in plain sight, a whole cosmos resting beautifully in a single grain of sand. May you all progress in the Dhamma. We look forward to seeing you on the next occasion. Goodbye.